Hi, this is Miss Rodriguez. This is just a recap of the lesson for Christopher Columbus and using sources like primary and secondary sources. During class, what we went over today, um, we talked about Christopher Columbus. The video link is in Skies, and students helped each other take notes on those Skies cards. You can see collaboration is on, and that means that you can see your classmates' cards and the things that they picked up from the video. Then we talked about the difference between primary and secondary sources, and we had students go ahead and take this quiz card. It says, and the recording is there for you. A primary source is an event that tells you, it's a source that tells you about an event, and it's from the time period of that event. So it's like a first-hand account. Examples of primary sources are letters, diaries, photographs, video recordings, speeches, newspaper articles from the past. And then it asks which one of these sources is not a primary source. So letters and diaries, that is a primary source. A speech is a primary source. A photograph or video recording is a primary source. The only option left is a textbook reading. Then we went over secondary sources. It tells about an event usually as a summary, and it relies on primary sources. So examples of secondary sources include textbooks, like Wikipedia, encyclopedias, history.com. People who are creating the textbooks today weren't alive when Christopher Columbus was alive in 1492. So they are not witnessing firsthand the events. And they're just providing summaries for us to learn about the history, but they weren't actually there to witness it themselves. So that is a secondary source, all of these textbooks, Wikipedia, etc. And then we did the little check-in here on the Skies card. For your actual lesson, we read in class together this text. So I can go over some of these with you. I'm just going to read the source aloud first. Document 1, from a letter by Christopher Columbus, October 12, 1492. And then you see that there's quotation marks here. I gave to them some red caps and to others glass beads, which they hung about their necks, and many other things of slight value, in which they took much pleasure. They all go quite naked as their mothers bore them, none of them more than 30 years old, very well built, of very handsome bodies and very fine faces. They ought to be good servants and of good skill, for I see that they repeat very quickly whatever is said to them. So question number 1 is asking who wrote this text. And you see here it says a letter by Christopher Columbus. So then you would just mark Christopher Columbus wrote this letter. And then it's asking what kind of source is document 1, a primary source or a secondary source? So again, we went over the difference between primary and secondary sources, and we can just go back to the Skies card or the PowerPoint. Examples of primary sources are like letters, diaries, photographs, recordings, speeches. Secondary source examples would be like textbooks or encyclopedias. Okay, so we see that it says a letter by Christopher Columbus, so it's from the person in the time period because it gives you the date, October 12th, 1492. That would make this source a primary source. And you could list any of the reasons that you find for explaining why it's a primary source. Primary meaning like a first-hand account, again, primary first. And so this is from Christopher Columbus himself. Now, I can't get you the actual document that would be in a museum, like his actual journals, but as long as we're recreating it and we're not changing things, like there's the quotation marks there, we're telling you the time period. It's not a summary of Christopher Columbus. This is an actual letter by Christopher Columbus. It has quotations, and it is a letter by Columbus written in 1492. Okay. And then the third question is asking, who is the they or the them that the author is referring to? Who is Columbus talking about? I gave to them some red caps and to others glass beads, which they hung about their necks, and many other things of slight value, in which they took much pleasure. They all go quite naked as their mothers bore them, none of them more than 30 years old, very well built, of very handsome bodies and very fine faces. They ought to be good servants and of good skill, for I see that they repeat very quickly whatever is said to them. In class, we talked about how he's talking about Native Americans. He's talking about people he saw on the island in the Caribbean when he landed. And then number 4 is asking, how does Christopher Columbus feel about the native peoples? What's his opinion about them? And 5 is a question that goes right after that, following that. How do you know that this is Columbus's opinion about these native peoples? I'm going to read it one last time. I gave to them some red caps and to others glass beads, which they hung about their necks, and many other things of slight value, in which they took much pleasure. They all go quite naked as their mothers bore them, none of them more than 30 years old, very well built, of very handsome bodies, and very fine faces. They ought to be good servants and of good skill, for I see that they repeat very quickly whatever is said to them. So, based off of this letter, what do you think Columbus is thinking about the Native Americans that he's seen? And how do you know what key words from the text tell you that that's his opinion of them? And that last question, what did you learn about Columbus or about sources that you didn't know before? And that's the assignment.